I'm here with Larry Weir, longtime voice of the Eastern Washington Eagles, and we're just headed into week 2 right off the bat. Going to talk a little football, what we saw from week 1. The Eagles, of course, versus Incarnate Word down at their place, and was a bit of a thriller in the first half and then some radio silence for a little bit. Of course, the Eagles didn't quite get the win, but what stood out to you and, across the squads that you've seen? What did you think of this performance?
I was encouraged by what I saw on Saturday. Even though they lost the ball game, AJ, they played, the offensive line was a huge question mark coming into this.
Right.
Yeah, they didn't give up any sacks. I don't think they got called for any penalties. And Eastern ran the ball for nearly 5 yards per carry. So, I think if you told Aaron Best that this is what you're going to do, he would have been really happy with that. And, these guys, they had one guy that's played more than 3 games of Division I college football as an offensive lineman within these 5 guys. So I thought they did very well there. And then the other thing that really stood out to me was on the other side of the ball, the defensive line. They limited Incarnate Word to under 3 yards per rush. They had a couple of sacks in the ball game. They put some pressure on their quarterback. They really stopped their running game. So that was encouraging as well. So those 2 things, the line play, I thought, was just huge in this ball game against Incarnate Word.
Absolutely. A lot of opportunities with turnovers as well for the Eagle defense, not all of them. They were able to capitalize. Coach Best was kind of mentioning that in his press conference of that, it's what you'd like to see, but you got to be excited about what you can get in that regard. When it's week 1 and teams are still finding their footing, how much confidence do you put in that of like, okay, is this a team that's going to be forcing fumbles and, hopefully being able to finish that through? Or was it maybe, week 1 jitter, or it wasn't their week 1 Incarnate Word, but was it early season jitters for them?
I think it was good defense on Eastern's part to strip that ball and get it out a couple of times. Now the next thing is once you get it out and it's on the ground, you've got to get it. And there were 5 plays in that game, AJ, that I thought were really big. One was the muffed punt, which was the one that went Eastern's way that put them in scoring position for their second touchdown, I believe it was. But the other were the 2 turnovers that Eastern committed and the 2 turnovers that they lost when they couldn't recover the ball when they poked it away from Incarnate Word. So, if they can be on the winning side of that and 3 of those plays go Eastern's way instead of 1, they win that game. And that's the one thing they've got to do. They have not been good at forcing turnovers the last few years. They at least got the ball out in this game. Now the next thing they've got to do is fall on it when they get it out.
Jared Taylor isn't a new name by any means to Eastern fans, but, seeing him in this role now, what stood out to you about his performance?
He's I think probably the biggest problem they had in that game offensively on Saturday was just, I think, timing. And it's all new. I mean, he's played some quarterback, but he hasn't played game after game after game, and he's playing with receivers that he didn't really play with last year when he was in at quarterback, and he was primarily the running quarterback when he was in the game. So it's going to be a work in progress with Jared. He did well. There were a couple of downfield throws that would have been nice if he could have hit on. But that's where I think the timing was just a little bit off. So let's see what happens. Maybe not in week 2, but in week 3 and week 4 as we close out the non-conference season and see where things stand when Big Sky Play opens at the end of September.
Obviously, preseason expectations always kind of muddy the waters when people are trying to figure out where teams stand. With this squad, Nolan Alm kind of mentioned that he noticed a difference in the sidelines, that they weren't panicking when they were down. It was a little bit more calm. Aaron Best kind of tied that in with maturity, which is, he was saying it's hard to explain, but there's something that's different, and that they both kind of quantified it by talking about calm, cool, collected in a sense. Is that something that you have gotten a glimpse of maybe in how you see this team carry themselves?
Probably not as much because I'm not around them on a daily basis like the players and coaches are all around things on a daily basis. But to me, when they say that, it's really astounding because almost all these guys are new.
Right.
24 players, I counted it up today, 24 players out of the 68 that made the travel squad last week were guys that had played half the season last year. That means 44 of the 68 were guys that didn't even play a half a season last year. Or were true freshmen or redshirt freshmen who didn't hardly play at all last year. So just the fact that there aren't very many experienced players here, to hear that there are some mature players among the younger guys, that's, great sign for the future and for the last part of this season, I think.
Definitely encouraging. And of course, also getting some Player of the Week honors early on in this season with punter Landon Ogles. Aaron Best was saying, he did have a couple in there. He said he'd say it too. He said the 72-yarder, helped him out. But, obviously encouraging since it's been a minute since the Afton Chisholm Player of the Week honors last year. But exciting as they head into their week 2 opponent in Boise State. The Broncos looking for a get-back game as well. Them being also an FBS opponent, there's a lot of different angles that you could take there as far as motivation, but just what do you think the biggest challenges or maybe advantages for the Eagles heading into this one?
I think anytime, AJ, you get into a situation where you're an FCS school playing an FBS school, the longer you can stay in the game, the better chance you have of being there and giving yourself an opportunity to win in the end. If Eastern can keep this game at an 8 or a 10-point game or whatever it might be at the half and still hang around into the third quarter, then what you have to kind of think about if you're the underdog is maybe the favorite will start to say, oh my gosh, they're still here with us. What we gotta, they start to panic a little bit. And that's what you kind of have to hope for in a situation like that. I mean, Boise State, in the old days, when it was FCS versus FBS had the numbers advantage because they have 85 scholarships compared to 63, and the 63 at Eastern's level, the FCS, are split out between the 85 guys. So when you start talking about full scholarship players, you're probably talking around 48 for Eastern to 85 for the FBS school. So just the having a second team and maybe even a third team guy that can contribute at a receiver or a cornerback or something like that at a high level is a huge advantage for the FBS school. The FCS school can still compete, with that first string, but when it starts getting down beyond the first string, it gets harder to do. But now with house settlement money and NIL and all this stuff going on, now you've got a money factor in there as well. So, Eastern's guys aren't getting paid. Boise State's guys are getting paid. They're getting paid a lot of money to come down there and play football. So that's the other tentacle to this whole thing. It'll be interesting to see how it is going forward because, Eagle fans know they went in 2016 and won at Washington State, 2013 won at Oregon State, FBS wins against Connecticut and Idaho, a couple of them against them, and UNLV in 2021, played Fresno State tight in 2023, played Oregon State tight in 2001, Colorado in 2008, Washington State in 2012, et cetera, et cetera. You could stay in the game in those days when money wasn't a factor. Can they stay in the game now with money as a huge factor in this game? We'll find out.
Absolutely. How much stock do you put when you're looking back at week 1, especially if you're a fan? I think it's easy to be like, okay, well, Boise lost by this much, so we have a shot. And their fans are doing the same thing to Eastern, being like, well, they did hang in there, like they'll be tired from that, or they'll have extra motivation from that. What do you think is going to be the number one driving maybe thing to set the tone in this?
I think just, you're going to have 35,000 people or whatever it might be, 37,000 people, whatever the crowd will be on Friday night. Eastern doesn't get to play in front of crowds like that very often. So, the Eastern guys are going to be wound up. They're going to be ready to go for this game. Boise State, they had a stinker in their first game. They're going to be fired up and ready to go. It's their home opener, but they also have gotten a talking to from their coaches this week that they were very disappointed in the effort and the execution and some of the things that went on last week. So they're going to have motivation because I'm sure practice was hard this week. If they have a good game on Friday, practice might not be as hard next week. So again, just getting off to that good start for Eastern. If they can hang in the game, and the longer they hang into the game and keep some pressure on Boise and have a chance to win the game going into the fourth quarter, that'll be the big thing for them. If Boise starts out and they land punches and Eastern doesn't throw any, then it's going to be a long day for the Eagles.
Right. I'm sure you've seen many short weeks in your years. 35, right? 35
35,
seasons.
yeah.
Want to make sure I get that right. That's why we
The
have him
gray
here.
beard
Did
is
you hear
what-
the list that he gave us of all these upsets? This is why we have him here. I'm sure you've seen many short weeks, but just that being a factor as well. That's one of the first things people always talk about. Blessing or a curse in the long run?
I think it's tough because not only are you on a short week, but you also had to travel, long distance to get back from San Antonio. They got back about 2:30 in the morning on Sunday. Normally, they would have a team meeting on Sunday and Mondays would be off. But this week, because the game's on Friday, they had to practice on Monday. And so the team won't get a day off until Saturday after the game. So that's a factor. Now you're traveling again. Boise had a long trip. They were at Central Florida, but they also played on Thursday night, 2 days ahead of Eastern. So they're going to have more time to prepare, more time to make some adjustments from game 1 to game 2. So short week, 2 straight on the road, that's a huge factor as well.
And just final thoughts, what do the Eags need to get right, and what do they need to, hone in on this week from your perspective, some things that could really give them an edge for a win here?
Yeah, I think just try to continue the progress that we saw. The offensive line, can they continue to open holes for running backs and for quarterbacks running? Can they protect the passer? Will we get a little bit more timing involved with the wide receivers and the quarterback? Defensively, can they slow down Boise State's run like they slowed down Incarnate Word? And then you've got a very young secondary that's been hurt with the injury to Mikel Broussard. So can some of these freshmen and sophomores in the secondary continue to take a step forward? You mentioned the kicking game. Landon Ogles, he needs to be maybe a little more consistent with his punting game. He had 3 or 4 good ones, and he had 2 or 3 bad ones in that game. And Eastern kicked off very well in this ball game against Incarnate Word. Incarnate Word never had a return in this game. So can they continue to get Boise State at the 25 and then maybe keep them behind the chains early on? If they can get them in second and long and third and medium to third and long, that'll help them out as well.
All right. Well, thank you so much for your time, Larry, and we'll talk to you again week 3.
Thanks, AJ.